So you'll have to forgive me a little bit since this is an unscripted sort of thing, and I know that when I go unscripted, things get a little crazy. But just about, I think, 7 or 8 hours ago, Square Enix announced that Voice of Cards, The Beasts of Burden, was going to be available on September the 13th of 2022. For those that don't know the Voice of Cards series, I can't say that I'm surprised because it hasn't really gotten a lot of attention, and it definitely does not have the fan base that I kind of would have expected it to have. Now, there are some reasons for this, and I might go over it. I'm not really shocked that there are so few people that know about the series or like the series, but at the same time, someone like me, who has played the other two games, I was really excited about this news for multiple reasons. So, Voice of Cards basically is Yoko Taro's current work. Now, for those that don't know Yoko Taro, again, I'm not really good with directors and that sort of thing when it comes to video games. I don't always know who makes the games. I only know the major publishers of the games. But for Yoko Taro, that's kind of the exception to my memory. So Yoko Taro has been involved in many things that I'm obsessed with. He was involved in the Drakengard series, so Drakengard 1, he was involved in Drakengard 2, just not as involved with it as his first game, then Drakengard 3, of course, and then we move on to the series that he's most known for, which is the NieR series. This means NieR Replicant, this means NieR Automata, this means NieR Reincarnation. So, there's not very many gamers that do not know about NieR Automata, at least. I know that NieR Replicant isn't as popular, and NieR Reincarnation, which is a mobile game, basically just got swept under the rug. So I understand if there are those that don't know about two of those, but NieR Automata, especially with the recent shenanigans with the secret church and all that was going on Twitter, I would say that there's not a lot of people that don't know about NieR Automata. Anyways, Yoko Taro's in charge of those. He is the mastermind behind those. So Yoko Taro obviously has a very colorful history when it comes to games, not only due to the Drakengard and NieR series, but he also had some involvement in some other gacha games, such as Sinnoh Alice, I believe is what it was called, Sinnoh Alice, and he also works with a lot of other developers to do collaborations. So Final Fantasy XIV, there was a NieR Automata collaboration. Babylon's Fall, NieR Automata collaboration. Punishing Gray Ravens, which is another popular mobile game, a NieR Automata collaboration. And of course, like I said, he also dabbles in mobile games himself. So between the mobile games, the collaborations, the Drakengard series, which then leads into the NieR series, he also does stage plays, so Yoko Taro just kind of like dips his hand in just about everything. And I think at one point he said something that his goal was to try and make a game of every sort of style. But again, don't quote me on that. I thought I'd seen it somewhere, but I might not have. So, I am absolutely obsessed with the NieR series, and so when all of a sudden I first saw the release of Voice of Cards, and I saw the dragon and just the art style, it just screamed NieR to me. Yoko Taro is infamous. He's absolutely infamous for putting lore into games that don't necessarily seem like they would hold lore for his other games. So, and he places lore everywhere. So every collaboration has some sort of secret lore that he says is canon to a main series of his, and he puts lore in books. So he'll put lore in manuals, in novels, he'll put lore at the end of an orchestra, he'll put lore, basically anywhere he can. And it's kind of our job as people that are obsessed with Yoko Taro's works to piece this lore together, and it can be absolutely maddening and a crazy rabbit hole to go down. So Voice of Cards, naturally, when it was first shown off, I, along with many other fans of Yoko Taro's work, said, oh my gosh, this has to relate to Drakengard or NieR, and so we rushed to pre-order the game. Voice of Cards is very unique in that it looks like a card game. The entire world is made of cards. So as you move, cards will flip over, your characters are put onto cards, the monsters are cards, like literally everything is cards. And it's told in this very interesting narrative style that I would argue is like Dungeons and Dragons if it was one player. and that's the best way that I can describe Voice of Cards. If you've ever played a tabletop RPG, this will actually feel very familiar to you. It'll actually feel very comfortable. If you've never played a tabletop RPG, it might seem a little cringy, and it might be a little uncomfortable because you're basically being spoon-fed this story as if somebody's reading a book to you, and you kind of just have to go with what the narrator is saying. The thing that I think confused people when it came to Voice of Cards was that because it was made of cards, people kind of expected it to behave like a card game. They expected something along the lines of a trading card game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or, gosh, what was that one that was super popular just recently? Anyways, there was a lot of card games that were coming out lately. They were strategy-based. You basically had a deck, and I think people expected it to be like Magic the Gathering or like Hearthstone or something like that. I think that was what people were originally envisioning. But luckily, to me it was luckily, Voice of Cards, though it does have the appearance of a card game, it actually plays like old school RPGs. So I'm thinking more like classic Final Fantasy or something like that. Yes, you do have a deck, quote unquote, but really what it is each character has a certain amount of skills that they're allowed to have, and that is the hand that you're given whenever you pull up those characters. So, it's a turn-based RPG. So characters will go one at a time based on their speed. Speed can be manipulated either by leveling up and increasing, and that value increases whenever you level up, or by putting on equipment that increases your speed at the cost of other stats, that sort of thing. So it's very simple as far as a game goes. It's not very difficult as far as like when you think about the mechanics. So you have 3 characters in a party for the first game, and those characters can have 4 skills. Now, you do learn more than 4 skills, so you can mix and match those skills to better suit like whatever area you're in or whatever you feel fits your playstyle better. I don't feel like there's any wrong way to do it. It's just based on what you think is better. Clearly, people would argue that there's a way to maximize damage based on builds, but I'm not that type of person and I don't get into it. So I think a lot of people were kind of confused. A lot of people were probably turned away from Voice of Cards because there are people like me that just are not into strategy or tactical games. And when I think of a TCG or trading card game or something like that, I do think of it being very strategy based, and I just don't have the brain for that. So I was really relieved when it actually plays just like an old Final Fantasy game where you basically just go, turn by turn, and you kind of hope for the best, and the goal is to get the enemy's HP to 0 before they get yours to 0. So pretty simple. Now, Voice of Cards was originally released, I think it was October 21st or October 28th. So it was first released October 28th of 2021. It kind of came out of nowhere. The demo was released the day that the announcement came out. There was a free demo that was given out for the Isle Dragon Roars. The demo itself was about an hour long, and it was super easy. People complained that it was just way too simple. And the problem with the demo is that it was so simple and so straightforward, it actually turned a lot of people off to the game, because they worried that there weren't going to be any difficulty settings and that the main game was just not going to be hard enough for them. And like I said, a lot of people thought it was going to be a card game, and then when they realized that it was just an old school RPG in the style of cards, some people were relieved, but other people were actually very angry because they wanted that card game aspect to it and just did not get it. For me, the reason why the demo was actually unique was the fact that what we didn't know at the time was that the demo was actually a prequel to the events of the main game. So if you want the full scope of the story, you had to play the demo, which again only took about an hour, not even that. You'd have to play the demo, and then you had to play the main game in order to get the full scope of everything. But I was kind of concerned when I first played the demo. Again, I was with a lot of the other people thinking that the game was going to be too easy. I wasn't really sure whether or not I liked the style. The map seemed really open, and I worried that it was going to be kind of boring. So, I wasn't 100% sure I was going to be sold. Now, they did have some DLC that you could buy, which was all cosmetic, and the first game had DLC that was based off of NieR Replicant. NieR Replicant is one of my favorite games, so I think the reason I ended up buying it originally was not because the demo sold me, but because I'm just a sucker for anything NieR Replicant, and I was like, okay, I gotta have it, you know? And so I ended up buying it on the Nintendo Switch the day it released. And I beat that game probably in about a week, not even a week. The game itself is only 15 to 20 hours long. It's a very short experience, but it was a good one. I liked the role-playing aspect of it. I did like that not only were there battles and such, but there were actually random events and things that you could do on the map. You would run into bandits and find out where their treasure's stashed, and then you'd have to go find it. You would find bits of papers with hints as to where there was loot. You would run into people who would basically give you options that you could choose, and the options could be good or bad. So, again, it kind of follows that whole Dungeons and Dragons, if Dungeons and Dragons was one player. And just finding out that what your different choices do was actually very fun. The only problem that I had with the Isle Dragon Roars was that there was a lot of the story that was kind of glossed over. But as far as the story goes itself, I really was kind of, I was kind of shocked to find out that I was kind of shocked to find out that the story was kind of a mixture of slapstick comedy meets, like, dark humor. And the further you got into the story, the darker the story got. So after I finished the main story of Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars, I honestly was hoping for another one. It was such a good experience, and the final boss had me sweating. So when they announced that a new one was going to come out on February 17th of 2022, I was astounded. I have never seen a game release a sequel, like, so freaking fast. And again, people were wondering, like, what the new theme would be, how it was going to be different. Voice of Cards, the Forsaken Maiden, it had a totally different tone. Right off the bat, it was basically very just emotionally draining, in a good way, I guess. It's very depressing, and it doesn't try to hide the fact that it's depressing. The Isle Dragon Roars tried to hide the depressing narrative behind, like, funny jokes and, like, just absolute absurdity. But at the same time, while that was fine, it kind of took away, I think, from some of the story. And up until the end, when it gets really serious, you're kind of just wondering where everything's going. The Forsaken Maiden, right off the bat, basically tells you, this is a sad story, it's going to continue to be a sad story, and it's probably going to have a sad ending. And, you know, so there's no surprises. And I kind of like that. I do like surprises, but I also liked the Forsaken Maiden in how it was very forward. The only thing that it kind of left me guessing for a while was, is it related to the first one? I thought, maybe it's related to the first one, or this could be like Final Fantasy, where every story is different. And I think for a while everybody thought that it was different, but I'm not going to spoil anything. You'll just have to play it for yourself. But the Forsaken Maiden, it was a little bit different, but probably not enough. So there was a lot of people that complained that between the two games, nothing much had really changed. And to an extent, I do agree. Yes, in the second game, you can quote-unquote sail across the ocean, but essentially you're just moving across a map, same as anything else. The map did seem a little bit bigger, but I can't say that something like that actually enhances the gameplay, because again, you're just doing the same things over and over again. The battle system was slightly different, but it wasn't different enough to really make a difference in my eyes. So sometimes in the Forsaken Maiden you have a 3-player party, and then whenever you team up with another maiden, then you have a 4-player party. Again, these parties are kind of circumstantial, which means there's not as much party customization as there was in the Isle Dragon Roars. There was also I guess it seemed like it was almost purposefully trying to make it harder by adding more equipment, but making the equipment a little bit more limited. So the main character is actually proficient in quite a few weapons, which I guess adds some customization. But at the same time, there's not a lot of armor, so that takes away some of the customization. And then there's party members that have permanent gear that cannot be removed, and therefore, again, that kind of takes away from some of the customization. So I feel like while they tried to do something different with the combat, they actually made the combat more difficult, but not in an enjoyable way. It was interesting getting to explore a whole bunch of new characters, but it did kind of suck that you couldn't really create a party with those characters until the game told you to do so. And even then, as soon as you got those party members, they were quickly taken away. I enjoyed the story of the Forsaken Maiden a lot more because, again, from the get-go, you just knew it was going to be a sad story, and you really wanted to see it get a better sort of conclusion, but you really weren't sure if it was going to have that conclusion or not. Because Yoko Taro does not believe in happy endings, and so even though the game had the potential for that, you really just weren't sure whether it was going to actually have a happy ending or if it was going to be one of those endings like all of his other games, which is kind of bittersweet. But we're not going to go into the ending. So again, I'm trying not to give any spoilers, whereas possible. So naturally, when they announced Beasts of Burden today, the first thing that came up to my mind is, how is this going to be different? Because a lot of people didn't want to play the Forsaken Maiden because from what they saw, it wasn't very different. And the changes that they did make, again, just seemed to make the game harder, but not in a way that it was actually too noticeable, and it was more of just a burden than anything. So what I'm seeing from what the actual web page for it said was that there are going to be a lot of changes in the Beasts of Burden, at least when it comes to combat. So without going to the story, we'll skip straight to the new mechanics. So Voice of Cards, the Beasts of Burden, it seems that due to the main character's ability to control monsters, you actually can collect pets in this game. I'm not sure how you do this. I don't know if she has a tamer card or something like that. I don't know if there's like a special skill that this character gets, but I guess after you've fought an enemy, or maybe while you're fighting an enemy, you're able to then tame that creature, and you're able to kind of keep it as a pet. They have not specified if, they've not really specified if this is something that you can do every battle, or if it's just some battles that you're able to do it. They haven't specified if you can keep the pets that you get, or if they're kind of like a one-time use, which means you have to continue to tame these monsters. I know that there's a pet shop, so you can buy certain pets, but again, I don't know if this is necessary only because they have a one-time use or not. It does seem like the character from what we saw, because there are some screenshots showing the battle, it seems to me from what I'm seeing, I see that the character has like a slash command, a defend command. It seems that they have like maybe a taming card, but it's kind of covered up. But I do see the pet cards. So it seems like this main character doesn't really have normal skills like other heroes have had in the past. So while she has her basic attack, it just doesn't seem like she has much else. Which means that the taming of monsters and the collecting of pets is going to be the skill system for the main character, which is fascinating but also terrifying. So it seems like the capturing of these creatures and taming them is an absolute necessity in the game. And it's not something that can be overlooked, which, I mean, for a gimmick is very interesting, but again, I just wonder how much more time this is going to add to the game, and whether or not it's going to be an enjoyable process. So it's like Voice of Cards meets Pokemon, but I guess we'll see. And I know that the pets have different ratings, and the highest they can go is like 5 stars. And I wonder if the amount of stars changes how much gems are needed in order to use these powers. Because looking at the screenshot that I'm looking at, the Volts Wasp that we're seeing, that is a 1-star creature, but it takes 3 gems to use, and it says deal bolt damage and inflict paralysis if the roll is 6 or greater. That's already 3 gems. So you can imagine if you got a 5-star Volt Wasp, it might be even longer than that, which is kind of scary. Other than that, there are not very many differences that have been mentioned outside of that. I know that there are certain monsters you can capture, and then you can give those to NPCs for certificates, but we're not really sure how the certificates are going to be used. As far as the DLC goes, in the Isle Dragon Roars, like I said, the DLC was NieR Replicant. Then in the Forsaken Maiden, the DLC set was for NieR Automata. And now for the Beasts of Burden, the DLC set is for NieR Reincarnation. So that's actually pretty exciting. I'm glad that they're still kind of pressing NieR Reincarnation and saying, hey, there is a third NieR game, this is what it is, you know. And it might get people to kind of look into NieR Reincarnation a little bit more. I know that NieR Reincarnation isn't everybody's cup of tea, but I like it, and so I am kind of excited because these are characters that I recognize. Our main character will have a costume, which is Fio and Mama. The mysterious boy will have a Lavanya costume, whereas the other two characters will have Rion and Noelle costumes, respectively. So that's kind of cool. And as usual, they also have a pixelated avatar, set, and then for pre-ordering, they have some a different avatar and a different card backing. So again, all DLC is always just cosmetic. So. And it looks this time from the screenshots that I have, it looks like the actual, the maps this time around are a lot more in depth. The Isle Dragon Roars was pretty cool with its settings, but it reused a lot of assets, which was not very fun. But the Forsaken Maiden really upped the ante. If it was raining, there would actually be rain on the cards, and you'd be able to see the rain, like, puddling on them, which was really cool. You'd be able to see the ripples on the surface in the way that the surface had kind of become, like, glossy. So I really, really liked that, especially in the Heart's Domain in the Forsaken Maiden, where everything's all glitchy, broken, and monochrome. You know, it was just really fascinating to see that, and I'm really glad that they added special effects to the map. So I'm really, really, really hoping that in Beasts of Burden that they continue to do that, but it looks like they have. From the screenshots we were given, it looks like they're still doing that. Again, we see places that have like a misty red fog, but other than that, I'm not really seeing a lot of terrain effects, so I'm hoping that there are more of those in the series. But we just don't have a lot of information on it. So, I mean, it's really, really hard to tell. But it does look, like I said, that they changed up the combat a little bit. The main character obviously has a very unique gimmick because she's able to control beasts. The maps do look like they're a lot more detailed than before, so I'm really hoping that there's effects on the map like there was in the Forsaken Maiden. And because it's Voice of Cards, you already know that you're in for some delightful music. The soundtracks for these games are absolutely amazing, and also the art style is very unique. So you're going to get great art, and you're going to get fantastic music. And I know that the Forsaken Maiden was kind of like bad in the way that people said that they reused a lot of the art. I mean, clearly a lot of the characters were ripped straight from the Isle Dragon Roars, so that kind of made people angry because they really wanted something different, since the art style is so fantastic. But it looks like the artwork for the Beasts of Burden is actually very unique, and from the two townspeople that I saw, it seems that we're going to get some new characters as well. There are some returning faces like the shopkeepers, but at the same time, I don't think that's a problem. I'm just glad that, you know, we are getting some more unique characters, which means we're going to have more unique art. I'm even seeing some monsters I have not seen before. I know that the Isle Dragon Roars and the Forsaken Maiden, they had a lot of the same monsters, but I did see some unique monsters in the Forsaken Maiden, and now I'm seeing even more unique monsters from the screenshots that we've seen for the Beasts of Burden, even though some of them are the same. So I'm really hoping that we see even more unique artwork so that people aren't complaining that we're just getting all the same thing. But it does look extremely fascinating, and the game comes out soon. So the release date for this game is September 13th of 2022, and if you want to pre-order it, you can pre-order it on PlayStation 4, the Nintendo Switch, and on Steam. I already pre-ordered it on the Switch, and it's kind of difficult to find, so you actually have to go to the search bar, you have to search up Voice of Cards, and then you have to scroll all the way down past all the DLC stuff until you see the pre-order tag, and then you'll be able to get it from there. But other than that, these games are actually very fun. Like I said, they're very short experiences. The Forsaken Maiden was longer than the Isle Dragon Roars. There are some additional dungeons after you beat the game. The games are notorious for having multiple endings, usually about 3. So there is some replayability there, but I wouldn't say that it's always worth replaying. I think that's the only downside of these games, is I don't consider there to be a lot of replayability. For the Steam versions and the PlayStation versions, they do have achievements, and I know that a lot of people like going after those because they're actually not very hard to get. So if that's something that you like to do, then that's fine. So I don't know. I'm just super hyped, and I'm wondering how long that these games are going to go. They've already gone through NieR Replicant, NieR Automata, and NieR Reincarnation as far as the DLC sets go. And so I'm wondering if they end up doing more games in the future, if they're going to delve into Drakengard. If they delve into Drakengard, then they have 3 more sets that they can come out with. So if they continue doing that, then, I mean, that's at least 3 more games that they can kind of milk, milk fans of their money out of, And then I don't know if they would ever go as far as, like, doing any other series that Yoko Taro has done. I can't say that I think Sinnoh Alice is actually very popular. I've heard a lot of people actually don't like it. So it would be kind of sad if they started milking Sinnoh Alice before they do Drakengard, but I know that Drakengard fans would have a heyday if this was something that they ended up doing in the future. But yeah, anyways, just let me know what you think. Let me know if there's going to be any more Voice of Cards. Let me know if you're looking forward to the Beasts of Burden. Just let me know if you've played Voice of Cards in general, and if this is something that you'd be interested in. I do have some blogs that I've written on the topic, so if you want to read my blogs as far as, like, my reviews for the demo of the Isle Dragon Roars and the full review for the Isle Dragon Roars, I should have the review for Forsaken Maiden up here soon, and of course all the details I found about the Beasts of Burden are also located on my blog. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, it's omggirlsgame.wordpress.com. And yeah, just thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you all in the next one. Ciao, you guys.